Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon. My name is Lisa Desoy, and I'm Head of Skills at the Mauritius Africa FinTech Hub. And I'm very excited to welcome you today to our Cloud Computing Crash Course 101. Before we get started, just a couple of notices. We do encourage your active participation in this session. This is an opportunity for you to ask any burning questions you have about cloud computing and how it could impact your business. Please do submit your questions using the Q&A function, which you should find at the bottom of your screen. All you have to do is open up that dialog box, submit your questions, and today's speaker, Naseem, and his team will be working to answer those questions, and we will have a Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. So without further ado, I would like to kick off today's session. Today we are talking Cloud Computing Crash Course 101. Digital intervention has transformed nearly every walk of our lives, especially over this last couple of years in the pandemic. It has overcome all the traditional processes and made them dynamic. And cloud computing is one such part of the digital transformation that has given businesses an entirely new way of working, managing, and accessing their data. Cloud computing has become one of the most noted and in-demand solutions for organizing, to storing, accessing, and managing of data. And to a large extent, it has changed the way that businesses can work and process their data. In this session, we are very pleased to welcome Naseem Ahmed, Cloud Enablement Practice Lead at Synthesis, who will be giving you an introduction to the concepts and terminologies around cloud platforms, whilst also discussing the benefits, potential risks, and how cloud can drive and execute business strategy. So I'd like to welcome Naseem. Naseem is Cloud Enablement Practice Lead at Synthesis Software Technologies. Naseem has 17 years of experience in the software development industry with a strong focus on the financial sector. For the last 6 years, Naseem has been actively involved in the cloud enablement and adoption projects for large organizations, and more recently has been driving cloud adoption for medium enterprises and understanding the challenges that smaller organizations face with cloud adoption. Thank you so much, Naseem, for joining us, and welcome to today's session. I'm also pleased to welcome Dean Meyer, Cloud Project Practice Lead, who will be joining us later in the session to answer your burning cloud questions. So don't forget to submit those questions during today's session. So Naseem, over to you for today's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Good day, everybody. I'd just like to start with introductions, which Lisa has already done, but my name is Naseem, and I am the Cloud Enablement Lead at Synthesis. That's quite a big word, but what that actually means is me and my team try and assist organizations moving to the cloud. My colleague Dean, who's also on this chat, will be helping us man the Q&A, and if you have any questions during the session, please start them up. He'll try and assist them. As Lisa said, I've been involved in the IT industry for almost 22 years, last 5 or 6 years specifically within the cloud space. Right, and I work at an organization called Synthesis, Synthesis has a presence in Cape Town, Joburg, as well as in Durban. A little bit about us: we were named the AWS Consulting Partner of the Year for 2021, as well as the Social Impact Partner of the Year for 2020. Right, it is the first African-based partner to achieve advanced AWS status on the continent. We have, as I said, locations in Joburg, Cape Town, Netherlands, as well as Mauritius. We have over 200 employees, and amongst them, we have over 200 AWS certifications. The industries that we work in and work across span from retail, banking, insurance, as well as the capital markets. Internally, these are the different divisions that we have, basically ranging from cloud services all the way to payments and cryptography, and a whole bunch of other stuff in between. But that's not the reason why we're here. And just the last slide quickly with regards to the introductions for Synthesis is these are some of our customers. Some of them you might recognize as organizations from Mauritius. but a lot of the blue chip organizations within South Africa are some of our clients. And this is the reason why we are here today, right? Is what is cloud? I've managed to find this very, very festive and cheery slide to try and explain what cloud is. This is courtesy of AWS Geek, but this slide explains it in one single go. It is the on-demand delivery of compute resources which are provided via the internet with a pay-as-you-go pricing with the aim to bring down your cost, right, which has a global footprint to provide your business with speed and agility so that you can, and all of this is elastic and scalable. Now, I understand that was quite a bit to actually take in. So what we're going to do is we're going to break this picture down into different sections so that we can understand each one. So let's start with the first picture, this on-demand. The on-demand is a very, very important concept when it comes to cloud, right? The resources that you require are available on demand. They are only provisioned when you require them, and when you don't need them, you turn them off. So the same way that you just pay for electricity when you use it, and if you turn it off, you don't pay for it. This is a very, very same concept that applies to on-demand cloud resources. That's the first part. You only pay for what you use. Right. So the second part of this thing is what we are all familiar with cloud resources, which is your typical servers, hard drives, databases. That is all the current hardware that we have sitting in our data centers or under the desks of the development department. However, that is not what the power of the cloud is. What the cloud is it offers a vast array of services which are available out of the box. And if we just look at AWS in particular, there are over 200 different services that are available to you. So services all the way from analytics to security to storage. What's amazing, I mean, I'd just like to highlight this one, is you have the ability to control satellites. Yes, you can buy space on a satellite and use the satellite imagery available on a on-demand basis. That is what the cloud affords you to do, right? These services are available straight out of the box. No need for you to build any of this infrastructure. There's no need for you to obtain developers or skills to try and build these things. So just to try and explain to you what is available at our cloud services, I'm going to talk of two services in particular. The first one being Cognito, Amazon Cognito, right? When you build an application, doesn't matter what application you're talking about, a website, a mobile application, the one thing that needs to be built is the authentication portion. How do your users access this application? How are they going, where are the credentials going to be stored? How do you know that the system that you're building complies to standards? And the most important, can the security system that you've built actually scale? Now, if you take a service such as Cognito, which is available out of the box, you get what is called a credential store that can scale to millions of users, right? You then, out of the box, have the ability to provide third-party, social identity providers and enterprise federation. So you could use Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, or any other SAML provider to access your application, right? It supports the standard OAuth 2, SAML 2, as well as OpenID Connect, right? So it's a standard space. It supports multi-factor authentication. It supports encryption of your data at rest as well as in transit. It is PCI compliant. It is SOC compliant. It's ISO compliant as well as HIPAA eligible. So what you've got by utilizing the service very quickly is is a credential store that is highly scalable, right? Highly secure. It is used by many people, and it's very easy to integrate with many applications, right? You just do a Google search for Amazon AWS Cognito integration, and you're going to find tons of people that have actually developed utilizing this. What that means is there's a very large body of knowledge available for your developers to integrate within your application, right? So you are not alone when you utilize a service like this. And the most important, how do you get charged for the service, right? You only pay for the users that were active last month. So if someone logs into your system, they're regarded as an active user, and there will be a fee for that. However, if that person does not log in, there is no associated fee with it. That is the power of the cloud. The next service that I just wanted to touch upon, right, is Lex. Amazon Lex is an AI or artificial intelligence service which is fully managed and can interpret natural language. This service is the same service that's utilized within the Amazon Echo speakers, and it allows you, and what this service allows you to do is to add natural language understanding into your application. So this AI can understand intent, it can maintain the context of a conversation, and allows you to automate simple tasks. What it also allows you to do is to create chatbots. Now you don't need to worry about the hardware or the software that is required to run any of these services. The way that this service is charged, you only pay when you use the service to interpret your text or speech. So there are no minimum fees that are associated with the service. I will talk a little more about the service a little later in the presentation. See, the next important concept with regards to the cloud computing is the global footprint, right? When looking at cloud, it provides you the ability to go global in minutes. The cloud providers maintain a global presence throughout the world, and in the AWS world, this is called a region. Right? A region is a place where AWS has deployed infrastructure to set up a data center. Now, from a Mauritius perspective, there are two regions that can easily be used, and those are Cape Town and Island. The reason that we choose these two is they are quite close by, which means that the latency and the speed provided to the applications is acceptable. So any applications that deployed within these data centers, you'll find that it's actually usable within these regions. Now, within a region, right, AWS typically deploys multiple data centers, and these data centers are called availability zones, right? A region has a minimum of 3 availability zones. Some regions have more, but never less than 3. These availability zones or data centers are connected via low latency fiber over a very short distance. So the maximum distance between these would be less than 100 kilometers. They have redundant power supplies. They're on different floodplains. They're on different earthquake plains. It's to try and make sure that in the event of some catastrophic occurrence, at least one of these sites actually stay up. That's the most important. The best practice when deploying your infrastructure into the cloud is to deploy your application into a minimum of 2 availability zones. So if you split your application between 2 of these sites, right, the likelihood of them both going down at the same time is very low, and you then term this a highly available application. And the other reason why you want it across 2 is that if the one site goes down, it is very easy to move the traffic or the application traffic from one data center to another, which means that your application could still function. The next section that I want to jump into is the costing and the pricing, right? This is one of the reasons why many organizations want to adopt the cloud. To understand this concept, I want us to look at how typical IT infrastructure is actually procured. So if you take a typical data center environment and how you currently procure your infrastructure, there is currently typically a 3-year outlook on infrastructure provision. So in this graph, I'm going to use this white line as the demand for IT infrastructure over the period of time as the business scales. So as the business scales, the assumption if everything goes well, this is how the business is going to grow. And when procuring IT infrastructure, which is our traditional hardware, this purple line, we take a view upfront of where are we going to be 3 years from now. So when IT has to set up budgets and try and procure infrastructure, at this point, they're looking 3 years in advance, and you are purchasing infrastructure now for something that's going to occur in the future, right? But how does the business actually function? This is this blue line. Businesses never ever function according to this predictability. It moves in cycles. It goes up and down. You have users that come in. COVID has taught us that whatever was the demand yesterday, it does not mean it's going to be the same tomorrow. You have incidents that occur, whether it be COVID, whether it be the hard drive failing on a server. Something happens which alter the demand of your application and the number of users that actually utilize the system. The difference between this point here of your demand of your application and the deployed infrastructure here is what is termed wasted cost, right? The reason for that is you have spent money purchasing hardware which is not being used simply because you don't have the user base to use it. Now, when you're looking at a cloud environment and you look at the concept of called auto-scaling, auto-scaling allows you to track your demand very, very closely. So as the demand goes up, you increase the infrastructure. As it goes down, you decrease your infrastructure. This point on the graph where your demand outskills, outstrips the supply, right? That is a catastrophic point, because if that happens, you will not be able to serve your customers. Your infrastructure will basically crash, right? And you're basically going to have a barrier. You will not be able to do business. However, within a cloud environment, you can set it up so that it automatically scales. The other thing that needs to be considered each time that you're doing these IT refreshes, these purchases, there's a whole bunch of red tape, there's friction, there's governance and procedures that have to be followed, which means that the actual cost of procuring your infrastructure is higher than what actually is actually spent, if not measured correctly. There's also a very long lead time between ordering and actually installing infrastructure within data centers, right? So these are all concepts around why the benefits of actually moving to the cloud. The other important thing, and this was a 2017 study done by the IDC, what they have found that a typical data center, only 45% of its capacity is actually utilized, which points to the fact that when people are actually installing these servers, they are over provisioning infrastructure because you've got this 3 or 5 year outlook when you're actually purchasing these items. And this, even if you don't have the data, best case, your IT infrastructure is being used at about 40%. There are 3 very, very important cloud principles that costing comes down to. The first one, the concept of pay as you go, right? You're replacing your capital expenses with operational expenses. So what is important is you choose the right size infrastructure for your needs. You don't need to over provision, since it's very, very simple within a cloud environment to obtain larger servers And this is in a matter of minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, you could obtain a much bigger infrastructure. And this is all based on needs. The second concept is you save when you reserve. If you're going to be running the system that you're deploying for a long period of time, let's say 1 to 3 years, it then makes sense to prepay or reserve that infrastructure for that period of time. Doing this, you could save up to 30% on your monthly costs by paying upfront, right? And the last one is you pay less by using more. The cloud providers provide you with volume discounts. As you utilize more infrastructure, the pricing comes down. While discussing this concept of pricing, I want to bring a new concept in, which is called serverless. All of these services, which are presented on the screen, are all serverless services. That means there is no associated hardware that you have to manage. There's no operating systems. There's no backup of data. All of this is part of the service that you're deploying. You only pay for these services when you use them. So if we take, for example, Lambda is a compute service. So you run your code in the cloud and that gets charged at 100 millisecond time frames. So it's a very, very short period of time, but you only pay for what you use. And utilizing what you've seen, these 6 or 7 services that you're seeing on the screen, you could set up a website, right, that'll use no server infrastructure. You only pay for it when it's being used, right? It'll be highly scalable and highly available, which means that if you go from 10 users to 1 million, this infrastructure will be able to manage it. And when it scales down, just the cost associated with the infrastructure is very, very small. The next concept that I want to go through is this concept of speed, agility, elasticity, and scalability. Now, for this section, or for the benefit of moving to the cloud, I would like to relate a personal experience that I had, which demonstrates this very, very clearly. To explain this, I'm going to go back to 2019. Synthesis engaged with a company in South Africa called GovChat. At that point, I was the team lead on that project. And just a brief history of what GovChat does. GovChat is a citizen engagement platform. So what they're trying to do is to allow citizens to communicate with the government. When they came to us, they were developing a solution to assist citizens to report service delivery issues, water leaks, potholes, electricity. But the main communication channel that they wanted to use was your messaging channels, your WhatsApp, your Facebook, those type of channels to communicate. So it was a very simple interface which utilized Lex right from the start, so that you could actually do natural language intelligence. So the initial plans for this was to roll it out in a very planned fashion. Small municipalities, small areas in South Africa at a time. And as the service was taken up, we were going to scale it. Right? The first version of this application was deployed in February 2020. At that point, you started hearing news of COVID. March 2020, South Africa went into lockdown. And by the middle of April, the South African government announced that they were going to be issuing grants, social grants to the citizens for which they needed to apply. GovChat was brought in at this late stage of the project. With a timeline of 7 days, we needed to get an application live on the 11th of May 2020. Right? The team got building, and within 7 days, we re-provisioned this application, which was designed to deport potholes and water leaks to assist the government to capture grant applications. Right? Choosing to go serverless as in every piece of this application, when we started with serverless, we incurred a very low cost upfront. But ongoing live, this same system managed to process almost 2,000 transactions a second, right? Within the first 10 days, 59 million messages were processed. We had 1.9 million users. For the month of May 2020, 2.2 million users with 100 million messages being processed. Average messages that were processed per day, 3.5 million. 2.2 million messages of applications for the social relief grant was processed in that period of time. Right. The most amazing thing, the Lex bot, which was capable of understanding natural context, was processing 320 concurrent conversations per second. And at that point, it was the highest usage of this service in the world. AWS had never experienced that level of usage of a service anywhere else. Looking at GovChat as it this month, these are the numbers that have been processed utilizing the exact same infrastructure that was designed back in 2019, all serverless, right? And we are now sitting at about 8.7 million users with almost 583 million messages being processed. Now, when looking at moving to the cloud, right, the one work that I want to reference is Simon Sinek's Start with Why. The first thing that we should do is, why do we want to do this? And why do you want to make the move to the cloud? The why, the what, and the how is the easy part. That's the technology problem can be solved. The why is a business problem. Why does your organization want to actually move to the cloud? If you do not understand the why, the migration or moving or adopting of the cloud is going to be exceptionally difficult. These are just some of the reasons why organizations move to a cloud. It's typically a combination of any of these, but it could be, are you planning a data center refresh? The infrastructure within the data center is outdated, it needs to be updated. Are you wanting to go global? Maybe you want to adopt new technologies such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things. You want to do big data analysis. You need to comply with certain security standards, which your current data center doesn't. You want to create an agile business with the ability to change and move. Any of these reasons could be why you want to move cloud. What is very important to note, if your only reason for moving to the cloud is cost reduction, right? You are not going to achieve this in the short term. Cost reduction is a long-term goal. When looking for the cloud journey, you have to look at the whole business case, and you can't only look at cost, the cost of associating, of moving. Before I get into the next section, I just want to highlight a quick concept which is called the TCO, or the total cost of operation. When you look at hardware infrastructure, right, the total cost of ownership, you typically ask somebody in IT, what does it cost? And they would be able to tell you, this is the price of the application based on the servers, the hypervisors, maybe the licensing and the storage. Right. What they don't account for, and which is not typically part of the IT budget, but someone's got to pay for it, is, let's take, for example, the real estate, the rental space that needs to be, that's associated with those servers or the data centers. The electricity bill that is associated with that. It's not a single line item on these servers, but there's a cost associated with that. The cooling, the air conditioning that runs those data centers, the networking infrastructure that is set up in those environments. I just had conversation with a customer in South Africa recently who spent almost 15 million rupees on LAN cables for a data center. That's just to connect the networking in their environment. The labor force that's associated with the data center. Now, we're not only talking about the IT staff, we're talking about the security, the maintenance staff, the cleaning staff. If it's a large enough data center, the gardening fees on the outside of the data center, which has to be actually taken into account. What about patching of all of these machines that you have to take into account? The wide area network, that's the internet connectivity into this. Typically, those prices and those costs are not part of the application when considering the cost of moving to the cloud. So when moving to the cloud, the idea is always look at the business case. What is the business value of moving this application to the cloud, right? So typically you have a timeline, and could be anything between 3 to 5 years. The first phase of your moving to the cloud is called the migration, or the migration bubble. And during this phase, right, costs typically spike. And the reason for this is you are now running double infrastructure. You've got your current data center, which is sitting here on the blue line, and that's going to cost you. So if you do nothing and stay where you are, that is what you're expected to pay over the next period of time. Moving to the cloud, initially, you're going to start incurring costs. But as you start migrating the applications to the cloud, starting to free up space on your data servers and the racks, reducing the cost of licensing, reducing the cost, the TCO cost of that application. By moving to the cloud, you're going to start achieving cost reduction. Typically, this payback period is between 2 to 3 years. So you need to look, especially when you're looking at cost, that's the time frame that you're looking at, about 2 to 3 years. After that, you start doing the cost optimization. How do we right-size the infrastructure? How do we utilize the correct services? Because managed services might provide a better service than the actual paid for, is in the stuff that you've built manually. And the biggest thing is what is the business value that you're going to achieve from this? What are the intangible benefits of moving to the cloud? So just off the top of the head, you're looking at future-proofing your IT estate, the ability to utilize new technologies, enabling a more productive workforce. They have access to the latest technologies. They don't need to start focusing on maintenance tasks only. The ability to quickly adapt to change. And these are all the non-tangible stuff that's going to come out once you actually move into the cloud. These are just some of the elements of a successful cloud journey. A cloud journey typically has 4 stages. It's the discovery phase, which is at the bottom, building of the foundation, the innovation, and the reinvention. It is at this phase, the foundation phase, where many organizations actually fall short. Almost 70% of the cloud journey is stalled here, and the reason for that is the change management within the organization does not take into account the move to the cloud. So it is important that as you move into the cloud, each stage of this journey, the reason for you moving to cloud, the why, has to change. And you therefore have to build in the metrics that allows you to assess whether or not the change is working. Items that can help you in this journey, you're looking at the cloud adoption framework. These are frameworks that have been set to assist organizations moving to the cloud. The Cloud Center of Excellence, which has a long-term view and architectural oversight on how applications move to the cloud. And the most important is this operations integrations. How do you integrate your on-premise operations team to understand how to integrate this new technology, which is cloud, and how do they integrate it into their existing applications? When you look at the world today, right, there's a lot changing. And this change is contributing to uncertainty in the market. Firstly, not long ago, you could be certain that a successful company would stay successful within your lifetime, right? So in the 60s, an S&P company, S&P 500 company, would have about a lifespan of 60 years. Today, an S&P 500 company has a lifespan of less than 20 years. This is primarily due to the accelerating pace of change within the market. The larger the organizations, the inability for them to change has caused them to lose ground. If you just think about this, a few years ago, the top companies of the S&P, you're looking at your Coke, Pepsi, those type of things. Today, you're looking at Facebook and Google. They were not there 10 years ago. The second part, companies are largely spending almost 2/3 of their budgets on maintenance tasks, right? Rather than on investments that can keep them ahead of their competition. And the third part, in this connected world where we're living in, where you have all these bad actors, the inability for organizations to stay ahead of people trying to access your data, the inability to deal with digital risk is resulting in many organizations failing where they are. When moving to cloud, many people feel that cloud is not secure. Putting your data up in the cloud can result in loss of your data. And what is important to remember when adopting cloud, there is a concept of shared responsibility. The same way that you have processes and procedures for storing your data within your data center, the same applies to cloud. It is called a shared responsibility model. The cloud provider is responsible for security of the cloud. So they're responsible for the data centers, the regions, the availability zones, the networking, the storage, all of the hardware responsible for building the cloud. However, the security for in the cloud, the data, the encryption, the file side encryption, the antivirus that goes onto the server, the operating systems, all of that is your responsibility. It's no different from what you currently have, where if you have a server in a data center, you need to make sure it's secure. That's exactly how the cloud functions. Very important, but if you can encrypt it, make sure you encrypt it. That's basically the important, but one takeaway that you should take from this. But it's not the responsibility of the cloud provider to ensure that your data is secure in the cloud. Now, when it comes to cloud, right, the biggest challenge that you are facing is not technology. The biggest challenge that you are facing is people and the processes that need to change when trying to adopt cloud. So let me give you an example of how cloud is going to impact people. So if you're deciding to utilize a managed database service within the cloud, the concern of a person employed by you as a database administrator would be, what am I going to do once you move to the cloud? You don't need me anymore. Unless you reskill this person, right? They're not going to have any work in the cloud, and they will not have a future within the organization. So people are not comfortable with change, right? And there are many people that are going to be impacted by your move to the cloud, from your hardware sales service providers, since you don't need any more servers, to software vendors who stand out to lose on licensing deals that are associated with servers that you have on premise. All of these people play a very important role when it comes to moving to cloud. And looking at this slide, you can see that the challenges are not technical. Challenges of moving to the cloud are people-placed. So you'll focus as you try and adopt cloud, you're going to have many reasons why you should not move to cloud. I told you earlier that servers run at about 40 to 45% on premise. people are going to say our servers run 100% peak CPU, peak RAM, right? If first off, nobody should actually admit that they are running their servers that hot, and it's very, very unlikely that your servers are running at that speed. So you're definitely over provisioned within your environment. Most of your servers, it's possible that all your applications are needed 100% of the time, but that could be true for production servers. What about your development environments? What about your DR environments? Those don't need to be running 100% of the time, but you have to purchase that infrastructure upfront and you pay for that cost. Development servers, you only need to run 12 hours a day, Monday to Friday. Why are you paying for 24 hours worth of time? You could come back and say, we don't pay for something by having stuff on the cloud. Many customers say that. Everything from servers to data centers are being free, but someone is going to pay for the electricity. Somebody is paying for the things that you think are free. If it's not you, somebody else is. This is a variation of the free. You've already paid for this. It means that it does not mean that there are no operational costs associated with maintaining what has already been paid for. It is unlikely that because any application, you're going to need maintenance, you're going to need patching, you're going to need to do the powers, the facilities. There is always a cost to do this. It's cheaper to do this on premise. What is cheaper? If you're looking at newer technologies, you don't have the staff, you don't have the skills, you don't have the infrastructure available to actually do large data analysis. It's not necessarily cheaper to actually do this into the cloud. And I want to end this section with this comment. What happens if we train everyone in my team and they leave? And what happens if we don't and they all stay? If you're ready to move to the cloud, this is just a very, very high level overview of how it's actually done. The first part is try and get an assessment of what the current IT infrastructure is. Utilizing your subject matter experts, your licensing agreements, your asset inventories, your configuration databases, architecture. So it's to try and get an overall view of where you sit and analyze this data to decide applications, infrastructure, what type of performance it is. And then you utilize what is called the 7R migration strategy. Retain, retire, retrain, relocate, rehost, repurchase, replatform, refactor. The important bit of this is, as you go up this level, the level of effort to move to the cloud becomes harder, but then your cost associated, this cost savings associated with the move becomes bigger, because moving a server as is, which is called the relocation, as is from on-prem into the cloud, is not cost-effective strategy. But if you refactor the application to use cloud services, that is where you are going to achieve the most cost. I would like to thank you for the time that you've given me, but before I open the session for questions, I'd like to bring to your attention that we are offering a limited number of free sessions to answer your business-related questions to cloud adoption. Registration for that is, please scan the QR code there and you can get to the registration page. And these sessions are offered on a first come, first served basis. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Naseem, for that very interesting introduction to cloud technology. Just before we jump into the Q&A, I do want to encourage people, there is still time to submit your questions to Naseem and the rest of the Synthesis team who are on standby to answer all your burning questions. This is a great opportunity for you to really pick their brains. So I encourage you to submit those now. We have had a question regarding the slide deck. We will be sharing the slide deck for today's presentation along with a video of this session so that you can rewatch it and go over all those fine details. And you will receive that probably next week in a follow-up email. So do check your inboxes and look out for that message from MAFH. It will also contain contact details for the Synthesis team and a link to that great special offer that they are kindly offering at the moment. So let's jump into the Q&A. We have had a few of these questions come up. So the first one off the bat is, would you say that cloud can be used for all sorts of solutions, particularly say we are working on something like a payment gateway? If so, what would the key AWS service be? Would it be Lambda functions or something else?
Okay, so that's a very interesting one. There are two projects currently at Synthesis, right? The first one, there's a internal development. It's called Halo Dot. Which is a payment system which turns your Android phone into a card accepting machine. You can have a look on their website. That infrastructure is hosted entirely on AWS completely. So yes, you can have a complete payment gateway. The second project that we're doing with a organization within South Africa is a full payment gateway clearing platform. So payments definitely is possible. The networking has to be architected correctly, and that's purely for security, but it's definitely possible. There's no single service. It's a combination of services that can be used for payments.
Maybe just on that, Naseem, as well. I think it also depends on just your comfort level of creating different types of modern architectures. So if you think about it, microservice architecture is something that's, been around for a few years, and a lot of development teams have adopted that. So, they're able to create very small, kind of services that are quite, focused. So if you think about going for the Lambda kind of route, that's where you go from microservice even to a smaller function of compute, and you would create function as a service. So if you're able to kind of imagine how you'd split your API into a function as a service, I think, yeah, Lambda would be a great fit. Suddenly you don't have to worry about the state of your API running. Is it running or not? Because basically you've broken it down into that smallest level of compute, and it actually becomes very affordable to run that. I think if you look at AWS's pricing, I think the first 1 million requests are free. So that's actually quite a great value offering from AWS.
That's great. Thanks, guys. So the next question we have is, what would happen if your data center flooded?
Oops. That's what I say. Especially if it's on-prem and you don't have a strategy, that there's a very big problem. I mean, you probably have a DR site, a disaster recovery site, but I don't know. On-prem, I've been out of on-prem for so long, I can't answer that. Dean, I don't know if you want to try that.
Yeah, I think if anything, in South Africa, we've got a city, Durban, and yeah, they had a disaster over the last week, just with flooding essentially. And you have to ask the question, if our data center flooded for some reason, or our host's data center flooded, how would you actually recover from that? And I think AWS's solution of having availability zones within a region is a great answer to that. Essentially the whole of South Africa would have to get flooded, or within Europe or Singapore, there's a whole lot of regions. You could consider a region-specific, approach where you kind of design for your data availability. So what's the most important thing? If you use a modern practice such as infrastructure as code, it means that all of your infrastructure can get restored in a repeatable manner. Perhaps not your data, so you would have to design for that. So store your data in multiple places, make it redundant, so that if there is a disaster, you are able to recover from that. So yeah, I think that's an important question to, you know, ask yourselves and see like what would happen in the event of a disaster.
Okay, great. Okay, so the next question is, are there any businesses that should be looking at cloud technology services, even though they are not hosting their own data or services on their own servers? Starter cloud, don't migrate.
A lot of the startups, I mean, in the last year, I've dealt with quite a few organizations, purely startups. GovChat is a startup. It does not have on-prem servers. It only has cloud presence. There are quite a few of our customers that we're dealing with that they don't even have on-prem. It's straight to the cloud. It makes life easier if you're going straight to the cloud because it's cloud native, and it makes designs much easier. There's another interesting benefit, especially for startups. AWS offers a lot of financing and financing programs around startups to assist them to move to the cloud. Even cloud migrations. There's a lot of capital available on migrating services to the clouds, which can be accessed, you know, provided you're utilizing the right partners to you can get their funding.
Yeah, and then perhaps just to continue from that, so, you know, over the years we've seen like different size companies attempt a cloud adoption. You know, so in those cases, you know, you always look at what's the total cost of ownership, and you know, how will I get my entire business onto the cloud? And oftentimes you don't actually have to take your whole business. You can start small. You can test perhaps one of your workloads, or you know, perhaps you have a new business idea that you want to test out. It allows you quite easily and affordably to test it and see what happens. You know, so let's take you know, the payment gateway question that was asked earlier. Test it out, see how it goes. Look at the pricing instead of purchasing all that hardware up front. You know, perhaps the business idea doesn't even work out. At least you would have been able to test it, pay a small you know, fee for your usage, and then qualify whether you should continue or not. And that kind of covers where you're able to adopt an agile approach in your business. So test something, see if it works, build, measure, and learn. And through that, you know, cloud computing is the only way you're able to embrace agile process on your infrastructure as well.
I think the one part is fail fast. That's the important bit, because if you fail, you know what doesn't work, which means that you can then focus your energies on what does work.
Yeah, always great advice, that one. So we have had another question come in via the chat function as well. This person asks, we are often at a point with our regulator where we are required to provide our regulators with the right of audit to the data center of the cloud service provider. Unfortunately, those service providers do not allow for these clauses to be included in the agreement, the right of audit. Is there a way to address those issues?
Right, of course. That's a difficult one. So I think where Mauritius is at the moment is, I think where South Africa was probably about 5 years ago, where the regulators are not completely aware or understand how the cloud actually works, and then treating it as a on-premise data center. And that's the problem. These things are more secure than your on-prem data centers, and it's like, so that's a very tough one. And the other reason why, when I was talking, I'd mentioned 2 regions, Ireland and Cape Town. From a data governance perspective, right? The laws is in governing the data and the storage of the data comply, like, for example, with South African laws very, very closely. Ireland's also got the GDPR laws. So those are quite strict data privacy laws in those 2 countries. The others, you know, they do have their data privacy, but they are subject to the countries that they're in. But I don't think there's an easy way around that audit problem.
Yeah, I think, yeah, something important to consider is AWS is, compliant in a whole range of countries. They do make public, their audit status. And I think, AWS does allow information requests as well. So they do kind of cater for information requests. I think, we maybe just need to clarify right of audit specifically, what those particular auditors would look for. If it's the regulator itself, I think the cloud providers usually engage with regulators directly. And it's not by themselves. They actually represent their customers' interests. So, particularly in the banking sector, we found this in a number of African countries. It usually involves the cloud provider as well as customers with their use cases being represented together. And it's through conversation that regulators tend to understand more about the approach, get comfort with the security and compliance controls that the cloud providers have put in place. And that's something that we actively see AWS doing. So I think, it's perhaps a bit of education as well, but it is something that's ongoing. And I think it's mainly being spearheaded in the banking sector.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, guys. So this question is, what is the most exciting current or forthcoming cloud-based technologies? So this is your chance to showcase some of the really exciting technologies.
Naseem, you love the language understanding technology, right?
that was a very interesting, I mean, the Lex was a very interesting technology, and its ability to understand speech as well as text, right? The interesting part about that, and it's just launched within South Africa as well, which is the interesting part, is that contact centers. I don't know if you guys have that there, but like, you need to set up a contact center. You have a contact center in the box, which is called AWS Connect. You can set up an entire contact center, and I did this in probably about half a day. 0 license fees. You only pay when somebody phones you. Up until that point, the entire contact center is free. It utilizes Lex within that solution as well. So you can then have people talking to the Lex bot, and it will then direct phone calls to whatever division, department you need to speak to. I mean, besides phone calls, it's a multi-channel. So you can do text, you can do emails, so it can retrieve data from multi-channels and then forward it to wherever it needs to go. And that's a very interesting. The other one is definitely your big data, your Internet of Things, big data. We have a customer who's streaming temperature monitors from trucks, freezer trucks, that's streaming the data into the cloud and then analyzing the data of how the temperature of the truck varies over the delivery period. So you can maintain a cold chain of that truck. That's the type of stuff that's quite interesting.
I think, maybe just to tack onto that contact center, if you think about it, like how many times, have you had to answer the same question over and over, like something that could literally be answered by a bot? And if you think about it, it's like you always have to scale your call centers with people. And if you kind of look at what solutions AWS is bringing to that space, a lot of times you could answer those simple questions through automation, but you can actually make those answers smarter. You can actually identify who's calling, you can authorize them, and you could actually give them contextual answers. So perhaps they want to know what's their account balance, or you could actually authorize that person and answer that question, because in your ecosystem, you're able to query that user's information. So there's lots of cool stuff you can do just through that process, through tools that are already available.
You just reminded me of something. Using that service as well, you can do voice recognition, like if you're phoning in, you have a voice pattern that the bot recognizes and compares to your voice and can confirm that that's the person actually speaking to you before he passes the call on. That's interesting.
Thank you. And I think we've got time for just this one last question before we finish today's session. Do you have a use case of a company that migrated to cloud here in Mauritius?
I think some finance.
Perhaps that was the case of the proof of concept. You know, so looking at how you would digitize a paper-based manual process, you know, and looking to start that off from scratch in the cloud. I think that was probably a very good use case. I think the challenge with cloud migration in Mauritius at the moment is, one is the regulator comfort, which, you know, is improving. It's you know, AWS is engaged with the Mauritius regulator for several years now, and I think that process is getting clarified or ratified. I think, yeah, there's perhaps a bit of nervousness to go all in. So I think it's perhaps on a workload basis at the moment. We're seeing more individual workloads getting moved to the cloud rather than a full company technology migration.
Okay, great. We have had one last question come in. Naseem, Naseem is answering that offline. So I think at that point then, we shall bring a close to this session. I'd like to thank Naseem and Dean and the rest of the Synthesis team for their insights today, for giving us their time to tell us a bit about the cloud. As I mentioned before, there will be a follow-up email that will hit your inboxes next week. That will include not only the deck from today's session, but also a link for the video, as well as the link for the special offer of those sessions that Naseem mentioned at the end of his presentation. So I do encourage anyone out there with more questions to follow up with the Synthesis team on this. So thank you so much to Synthesis for their time. Thank you so much to you as participants for giving up some of your afternoon this afternoon to learn a bit about cloud. And we look forward to welcoming you to future MAFH sessions. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.